A year within a minute. Chapter 1, The Moment I Drifted. It was just a moment. A blink, a breath, the pause between heartbeats. I had sat down, as I often did, by the window in my quiet little room, cup in hand, steam curling upward like a whisper I couldn't quite hear. The world outside was wrapped in the hush of early evening. Shadows leaned long across the ground, and the last birds flitted through air that shimmered with the gold of a vanishing sun. It was calm, the kind of calm that makes time feel uncertain. I don't recall closing my eyes. Perhaps I never did. But something softened inside me, something subtle and wordless. A thought without shape. A breeze that came from nowhere. And then, I wasn't there anymore. The place I found myself in didn't look like the room I'd known. It was open, endless. A field that stretched in all directions, not made of grass or earth, but something that shimmered gently, like fabric made of starlight. The air was warm and slow. Not heavy, just gentle. Each breath felt like a melody, soft and slow, as though the world was humming a lullaby just beneath the surface of silence. There was a sky, though it didn't feel above me. It felt around me, like I was floating inside it. It changed color as I moved, lavender, pale blue, peach, and shades I didn't have names for. I began to walk, not knowing why. I didn't need to know. My steps made no sound, but they felt real. Each movement was like a ripple in a still pond, spreading outward, unnoticed and infinite. I didn't feel lost. I didn't feel found either. I simply was. Soon, I came upon something, a tree, tall and silver, with leaves that tinkled softly in the breeze like tiny bells. I touched its trunk. It was warm, almost like it was breathing. There was no path, no sign, but I kept walking, and things appeared when I needed them. A bridge over a stream that glittered like liquid moonlight. A boat shaped like a shell waiting at the edge of a silent lake. Time didn't pass here, not like it does in the world I came from. I didn't measure days. I measured moments. Smiles. Silences. Stillness. I met no one. But I wasn't alone. There was a rhythm to this place, a gentle pulsing beneath the ground, like a heartbeat slowed to a whisper. I matched it, unconsciously. My thoughts began to drift, not out of distraction, but as though they'd found a softer place to rest. Sometimes I would sit for what felt like hours beneath a sky that rained light instead of water. Other times I would walk beside rivers that carried floating lanterns that whispered forgotten lullabies. Everywhere I went, I felt as if the place remembered me. As if it had been waiting. One day, or what I decided to call a day, I found the house. It wasn't there, and then it was, as if the land had sighed and created it for me. It was made of wood that glowed softly, and windows that opened onto scenes I hadn't yet lived. Inside, there was a bed, a table, and a journal. I don't remember deciding to write, but when I picked up the pen, words came without effort. Today, the river sang my name. The wind smells like memories I haven't made yet. I do not want to leave, but I do not fear returning. The more I wrote, the more I realized something. I had been here a long time. I couldn't say how long. But long enough for the pages of the journal to be filled. Long enough for seasons to shift, not by temperature, but by color and tone and the way silence moved. Then came the moment. The moment I'm still trying to understand. I was standing at the edge of a great hill, watching floating lights dance over a valley of still water, when the breeze changed. It carried something new, familiar and strange. It was a scent. A sound. A sensation. Reality, nudging gently at the edge of the dream. I turned, and the hill behind me was gone. The sky rippled, and for the first time, I felt the quiet beginning to fade. I took one last deep breath. And then I opened my eyes. The cup was still warm in my hands. The steam still curled lazily upward. And the world outside the window was no darker than before. Only a minute had passed. Just one. But within that minute, I had lived a year. A quiet, tender, floating year. And the memory of it still hums softly within me. Chapter 2, The Garden That Grew My Thoughts. It didn't take long before I found my way back. Or maybe the place found me. I wasn't trying to return. I wasn't even thinking about it. I had simply leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes, and let myself drift the way one might float on warm water. No weight. No worry. No will. And when I opened my eyes again, the sky was violet. The kind of violet you'd find in a forgotten corner of a watercolor painting. And beneath it, I stood on the edge of a garden, not any garden I'd ever known, but one stitched together from wonder and warmth. The soil glowed faintly, as if lit from within. Soft, bioluminescent hues rose from the roots of the plants. Flowers the size of teacups swayed in a breeze that carried no sound but carried something else, thoughts, I think. Memories I hadn't remembered thinking. I stepped forward, barefoot, though I hadn't noticed I'd lost my shoes. The earth was cool and kind beneath my feet. Each step I took caused the flowers around me to lean gently in my direction, as though listening. And perhaps, they were. There was a bench, nestled beneath a canopy of leaves that shimmered silver in the light. I sat without hesitation. There was no reason to hesitate here. In this world, hesitation didn't exist. Everything moved with ease. With grace. With trust. I looked around, breathing in the air that felt like velvet and honey. It smelled not of flowers or grass, but of old books and soft rain. Comfort. Familiarity without a source. And as I watched, something strange began to happen, although strange is not quite the right word. Perhaps it was expected, in a world like this. From the soil just a few feet in front of me, a plant began to grow. Slowly, steadily. A sprout at first, then a stem, then wide leaves unfurling like silk pages. At its top bloomed a single flower. Pale blue, with petals like glass and light woven together. I leaned closer. At the center of the bloom was a shape. Small and glowing softly. A memory. My memory. It was the scent of my grandmother's scarf. The feel of her knitting needles brushing my leg as I sat beside her. The sound of her quiet humming when she thought I wasn't listening. A moment from years ago. A moment I hadn't thought of in what felt like lifetimes. And yet, here it was, blooming in front of me. The garden, it seemed, grew thoughts. I looked up and saw other blooms all around now. Some had already opened, their centers glowing with scenes from my life, tiny vignettes playing silently. There I was, learning to ride a bike. There I was, lying on the roof at night with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, staring at the stars. There I was, crying quietly behind the school gym, holding a letter I never gave to anyone. All these moments, sprouting softly into being. Not for pain, not for pride, just for remembrance. They didn't pull me back into them. They let me witness. And witnessing, I realized, was enough. A small bird with feathers made of light landed on my shoulder. I didn't flinch. In this world, nothing arrived with suddenness. The bird chirped once, gently, and I understood, not through language, but through knowing, that it was time to walk again. I left the bench and followed a winding path that hadn't been there before. It curved gently, leading me through arches of ivy and trees whose trunks glowed with faint patterns, like constellations etched into bark. The path brought me to a clearing. In its center stood a stone pedestal. Resting atop it was a compass, round, delicate, and humming with soft energy. I touched it. Its needle spun once, then stopped, not pointing north, but pointing inward. It wasn't a compass for direction. It was for intention. Where I wished to go, it would guide me. But I had to feel it first. I stood still, letting my thoughts settle like snowflakes in a still room. I didn't chase any particular memory. I didn't reach for desire. I just allowed. And then, the needle shifted. Slowly, deliberately. I followed. The new path led me past glassy ponds where koi-like creatures danced beneath the surface, casting no reflections. Along the banks, petals floated above the water without touching it. Eventually, I came upon a doorway, freestanding, without walls, without a roof. It was made of dark wood and glowing vines, and it stood in the center of a ring of moss. I didn't need to knock. I didn't need to hesitate. I stepped through. And found myself in a room made of sky. The walls were clouds, gently drifting. The floor was soft like spun wool, and the ceiling shimmered with stars. In the middle of it all was a table, and on the table, a book. Thick, leather-bound, with no title. When I opened it, I discovered the pages were blank. But as I ran my hand across the parchment, words began to form. My own words. Things I had said. Things I had thought. Things I had never dared to admit, even to myself. Each word glowed for a moment, then settled into ink. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't ashamed. Here, honesty was weightless. I wrote for what felt like hours. Or perhaps I never touched the pen at all. Maybe it was the act of remembering that wrote the story. When I finally closed the book, I felt lighter. And the room began to dissolve, slowly, like sugar in tea. I walked out into the garden again, now changed, deeper somehow. More alive. The flowers bowed softly as I passed, and the path brought me to the silver tree once more. This time, I sat beneath it, resting my back against its gentle bark. Above me, the sky was slowly shifting from lavender to indigo, as if even the heavens were beginning to settle down. I closed my eyes, not from weariness, but from fullness. The way one does after a long, beautiful conversation. I didn't know how much time had passed. But it didn't matter. Here, a year could bloom in a moment. And a moment could last a lifetime. And all of it was mine. Chapter 3, The Clock with No Hands. I don't recall waking. I simply opened my eyes, and there I was, somewhere new, yet somehow familiar. The ground beneath me was soft and warm, like worn velvet, and stretched far into a gentle horizon of mist. Overhead, the sky rippled with pale colors, faded coral, morning silver, the quiet blue of a whisper. I stood slowly, as if even motion here needed to remember how to begin. Before me stood a building, not tall, not grand, but calm. A small stone tower, round and welcoming, wrapped in vines that bore soft orbs of light instead of flowers. A single wooden door, slightly ajar, seemed to breathe with the rhythm of the air around it. I stepped inside without hesitation. The first thing I noticed was the silence. It wasn't empty. It was full. A kind of silence that listens. A hush that holds. The tower's interior was circular, and its walls were lined with shelves that held no books, only timepieces, hundreds of them. Clocks of all shapes and sizes, delicate pocket watches with etched cases, enormous grandfather clocks with faces worn smooth by years, hourglasses with sand that floated instead of falling. But none of them moved. The hands were still. The pendulums did not swing. Even the sands remained suspended, caught in perfect stillness between beginning and end. And in the center of the room, on a pedestal of marble, sat the strangest clock of all, round, brass-rimmed, and entirely handless. Its face shimmered with a faint inner glow, as if illuminated not by light, but by memory. I approached it slowly. Not from fear, there was never fear in this place, but from reverence. When I touched the edge of the handless clock, warmth surged through my fingertips, not hot, just alive. The kind of warmth that felt like a distant sunrise, or the comfort of a familiar voice echoing through years. The surface shifted. Patterns emerged, like ripples spreading through still water. And then, scenes began to play across its face. Not scenes from the outside world, but from within. Moments I had forgotten, or perhaps had never quite understood. There I was, standing on the balcony of an old train station, watching snow fall on a town I'd never named. There I was, laughing in a language I no longer spoke, in a country I had never seen with open eyes. There I was, staring up at a canopy of trees that looked suspiciously like stars. They weren't memories in the traditional sense. They were possibilities. I came to understand that this was not a clock to measure hours. It measured presence. Moments when I had been truly here, wherever here was. Moments I had let go of, when, and simply existed in the now. It didn't need hands because it didn't care where the past ended or the future began. Only this moment mattered. I sat on a cushion of moss near the pedestal and breathed in the scent of old wood and slow time. A low hum rose from the walls, barely audible, but somehow familiar. Like the ticking of 1,000 hearts slowed into harmony. I began to notice the other clocks again. Some now showed faint signs of movement, barely perceptible shifts in their stillness. A pendulum twitching like a dreamer turning in their sleep. A grain of light drifting from one side of an hourglass to the other. Time here wasn't rigid. It responded to awareness, to reflection. The more I let go of counting, the more alive time became. I walked to a tall grandfather clock standing in the corner. Its case was carved with patterns I didn't recognize, yet felt as though I'd drawn them myself. I opened its door, and inside, where the pendulum should have been, I found a small mirror. When I looked into it, I didn't see my face. I saw a moment. I was sitting beneath a tree, the tree. The silver one. I held something in my hand. A feather, perhaps. Or a strand of light. And I was smiling. Not because something had happened. But because nothing needed to. I closed the clock gently, and as I did, its pendulum began to swing. Just once. A soft, full arc. Then stillness again. It was enough. At the edge of the room, a spiral staircase appeared, though I hadn't noticed it before. It wound upward into the quiet, disappearing into a soft amber glow above. I climbed slowly. Not because I was tired, but because here, slowness was a kind of reverence. Each step felt like a breath. A wordless promise to be fully present. At the top, I found a round chamber with no roof. Only sky above, open, shifting, gentle. In the center of the chamber stood a sundial, its shadow frozen in place despite the moving light above. Around it were 6 stones arranged in a circle, each one etched with symbols that shimmered only when looked at directly. I sat on one of the stones and listened. To what? I don't know. Perhaps to myself. Perhaps to the sky. Time, I thought, isn't always a river. Sometimes it's a garden. Sometimes a mirror. Sometimes a clock with no hands, asking not when, but how. How present were you? How soft? How still? I closed my eyes, and when I opened them again, the sky above had turned from gold to deep twilight, and tiny stars flickered into view, stars that moved not with the heavens, but with my breath. I stood, and without needing to decide, I knew it was time to descend. The staircase was no longer behind me. Instead, a gentle ramp of light led downward. When I returned to the lower chamber, the clocks were ticking now, softly, irregularly, like laughter in a dream. The handless clock still glowed gently at its pedestal. I bowed slightly to it, though I didn't know why. The moment I stepped back through the tower's door, I was not the same. Not older. Not wiser. Just quieter. More attuned to the silence within all sound. And as I walked into the landscape beyond, I noticed that the sky had softened once again, colors folding into one another like memories folding into rest. And time had stopped trying to chase me. It simply walked beside me now. Chapter 4: The House That Waited for Me. ChatGPT 42000. Chapter 4: The House That Waited for Me. 4. There are places, I believe, that remember you. Places that remain long after you've gone, not because they were built from wood or stone, but because they were shaped by longing. And when you return, even if you don't know you're returning, they welcome you as if no time has passed at all. That was the feeling I had when I found the house again. I didn't seek it. I had simply wandered, through fields of color-shifting grasses, past trees that whispered lullabies with leaves shaped like lanterns. The air was thick with that peculiar hush I had come to know in this world, a hush that was never empty but always full. And there it was, nestled in a small valley wrapped in twilight. The same wooden house with softly glowing windows and a roof made of what looked like woven bark. Its door stood slightly ajar, like the beginning of a sentence you were always meant to finish. A breeze lifted the edge of my sleeve, and I felt the house breathe. I stepped inside. Nothing had changed. And everything had. The table still stood by the window, covered in objects that had no labels, small stones, feathers, a jar of golden dust that moved like music when shaken. The fireplace flickered with light, though no fire burned. And on the windowsill, a teacup waited, full, warm, gently steaming. I didn't question it. I sat down. There's something about a quiet room that holds your name without needing to say it. As I sipped, the taste was exactly what I needed, though I couldn't say what it was. Not tea. Not soup. Just warmth. Memory made liquid. And beside the cup, as if it had always been there, lay a small key. Brass. Worn. Familiar. I picked it up, feeling the cool metal shift gently against my fingers. It hummed, not audibly, but somewhere beneath my ribs. I looked around the house. It didn't seem to have doors that needed keys. But something in me remembered. I stood and walked toward the back wall. The wood there shimmered faintly, like something hidden behind an old photograph. And as I touched it, a seam revealed itself, a door I hadn't noticed before, though perhaps it had always been waiting for me to see it. The key turned with a soft click. The door swung open without sound. Beyond was a hallway bathed in amber light. Its walls were lined with portraits, but not of people. Of moments. Each frame held emotion, the rise of wind over a hill, the closing of a child's eyes and laughter, the moment someone lets go of something they've carried too long. I walked slowly, watching the walls breathe with memory. My memory. Not as I had remembered it, but as it had felt. At the end of the hallway stood another door. This one needed no key. I touched it, and it opened like a sigh. The room beyond was round, with a domed ceiling that shimmered like dusk. In its center was a chair, and above it, hanging in the air, was a mobile made of fragments. Tiny shapes, paper birds, thimbles, grains of rice, broken watch gears, suspended in midair, turning slowly as if caught in a current only they could feel. I sat in the chair. As soon as I did, the room shifted. Not violently. Not suddenly. But like breath slowing in sleep. The mobile began to hum softly, each piece vibrating in quiet rhythm, and in my mind, something opened. I remembered the first time I had cried without knowing why. I remembered the warmth of a dog curled against me during a thunderstorm. I remembered a night spent walking alone in a city I had never been to, feeling perfectly at peace. These memories came not as sharp images, but as sensations. And then I saw the house again, not this house, but the one from my childhood. The chipped windowsill I had carved my initials into. The echo of piano keys played too softly for anyone but me to hear. The smell of cinnamon that lingered in the hall even when no one had baked. The house had been gone for years. But it had come here. Or maybe, a part of it had never left me. I looked up at the mobile. A new piece had joined it, small and round, like a marble made of reflected sky. And in that piece, I saw myself. Not as I am. Not as I was. But as I might have been, had I never forgotten the softness of the world. The mobile spun once more, and I closed my eyes. When I opened them, I was back in the main room. The fire was warmer now. The cup had refilled itself. Outside, the stars had shifted places. A new constellation sparkled above the roof. I watched it from the window, tracing the pattern with my fingertip against the glass. I could have stayed there forever. And maybe I did. In some way, part of me still does. Before I left, I found a box beside the door. Inside, folded carefully, was a map. It wasn't like any map I had seen before, no lines, no names, no directions. Just textures. Light. Swirls of ink that looked more like music than geography. At the bottom, a single phrase. Where you go depends on what you remember gently. I folded the map and slipped it into my pocket. The door opened before I touched it, and I stepped once again into the dusk-colored world. The house behind me didn't vanish. It simply waited. I turned once to look back. Its windows glowed like the eyes of a friend who says goodbye with the promise of reunion. I walked on, not with purpose, but with peace. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the faint ringing of wind chimes, slow, soft, like time breathing through glass. And as I followed the fading path of sound, I felt the weight of nothing at all. Only stillness. Only the kind of silence that keeps you company. Chapter 5: The River That Carries Names. I had walked for what felt like hours, or perhaps only moments, when I first heard it. Not a sound exactly, but a feeling. The sensation of movement just beneath the edge of awareness. Like memory stirring in its sleep. I followed it without question, not because I knew where it led, but because something deep within me already trusted the direction. And then I saw it. A river. But unlike any river I had ever known. It moved slowly, deliberately, with a current as gentle as breath. The water wasn't clear, yet not opaque. It shimmered with a soft, internal glow, like moonlight caught in honey. Beneath its surface, small lights floated, some bright, some dim, none alike. And along its bank stood tall reeds that sang softly when the wind passed through them. Not in melody, but in something deeper, like a language made of memory and longing. I knelt at the water's edge and dipped my fingers in. Warm. As if the river had known me. And when I looked closer, I saw them, names. They drifted on the surface of the water, written in light, delicate as whispers. Some I recognized. Some I didn't. Some I felt rather than read. One name paused near me. It shimmered faintly, hovering just within reach. I whispered it aloud, though I wasn't sure why. And the moment I did, a ripple spread across the river. The world seemed to pause. And then, beside me, a figure began to form, not solid, not ghostly, but made of presence. Not someone else. Me. A younger version. Sitting in a school hallway, knees pulled to my chest, arms wrapped around them like a cocoon. The expression on that face was one I remembered, though I'd long stopped thinking about it. It was a lonely day. One I had buried deep. But the river remembered. Not to wound me, but to remind me that I had been there. That I had passed through it. That I had survived. The figure faded with the next ripple. And in its place, another name drifted past, this time not mine. I reached for it but did not touch. Some names are not ours to hold again. Only to witness. I watched it go, drifting gently downstream, until it vanished beyond the bend. There was peace in the letting go. Farther down the riverbank, I saw a boat. It looked woven, like it had been shaped from reeds and starlight. It rocked gently, tied to a post by a thread of golden light. I stepped inside, and the thread untied itself. The boat began to glide, slowly, soundlessly, following the current. The river whispered as we moved, though not in words. More like the echo of someone remembering you kindly. As we drifted, scenes unfolded along the shore. Not buildings. Not people. Moments. Like paintings hung across time, framed in mist and light. One showed a woman brushing dust off an old journal, her eyes shining with something between grief and wonder. Another showed two hands reaching across a gap, trembling, then touching. A third showed a child running through a garden filled with bluebells, the laughter caught on wind that would carry it for years. Each scene was tender, private, eternal, and none of them needed to be explained. At one point, the boat paused beside a small dock made of stone. A narrow path led up a hill, where a single bench waited beneath a willow tree. I stepped out and walked toward it. On the bench lay a notebook. I opened it. Inside were names, written in many hands. Some careful, some rushed. Some fading, some fresh. It was a book of remembering. I found a page that was blank. And without needing to ask permission, I wrote. The river carried me to where I had once forgotten I belonged. And now, I remember gently. I closed the book. The breeze stirred the pages behind me. Back in the boat, I continued. The river grew wider, the lights beneath the water brighter. Some glowed like stars. Some flickered like candle flames. Some pulsed like heartbeats. Each one, I knew, was a name remembered. A moment honored. A presence felt again, even if only for a second. I didn't try to read them all. That would have been too much. But I held them in my heart, the way one holds the warmth of a fire they pass by. Eventually, the boat reached a gentle shore. No dock this time. Just soft earth, and a path lined with stones that shimmered underfoot. I stepped out. The boat did not vanish. It simply waited. Perhaps for someone else. Perhaps for another version of me. The river whispered one last time. A single phrase, carried by the wind. All names are kept, even when forgotten. I smiled. And walked forward. The path led into a quiet forest, where the trees bent overhead like guardians of old dreams. Their branches moved without wind, as though responding to the rhythm of footsteps. And somewhere in the distance, I heard it again. The soft chime of wind bells. Not signaling arrival. Not marking departure. Just accompanying. Like the murmur of water beside a traveler who no longer asks how far they've come. Chapter 6, When the Clock Struck Still. The path through the forest grew softer as I walked. Not in terrain, but in feeling. The leaves beneath my feet no longer crunched or whispered. They simply accepted my steps, the way still water accepts a fallen feather. Above, the canopy shimmered with threads of light, some golden, some violet, some with no color at all, just a soft presence. And as I passed beneath them, I felt a gentle quietness settle deeper into my chest. It was the kind of silence that doesn't come from the absence of sound, but from the presence of peace. I walked without hurry, without aim. I had nothing left to seek, only to receive. Eventually, I came to a clearing. In its center stood a structure, tall, circular, built from stone that shimmered faintly like dew-dusted petals. A clock tower. But not one that rose above me. This one rose within me. I felt it before I truly saw it, like an echo meeting its origin. It had no bells, no windows, only a single arched doorway, gently glowing from within. And carved above the entrance were words I didn't need to read to understand. Come when time no longer holds your name. I stepped inside. The chamber was round and open to the sky. No roof. Just stars. Thousands of them, slowly moving in patterns I almost remembered. At the center of the room stood a single object, a clock. Much like the one I had seen before, brass-rimmed, no hands. But this one was larger. Older. Wiser. It rested upon a pedestal carved with soft grooves, worn by the touch of many visitors. Maybe millions. Maybe only me. I approached, and the air thickened, not with weight, but with meaning. Like something important was about to be remembered. When I touched the clock, it didn't tick. It exhaled. And I felt it, not in my ears, but in my pulse. A breath echoing through time itself. Around me, the chamber shimmered. Not with light, but with moments. They unfolded like petals, gently opening around me. I saw myself in the house again, watching rain fall on a glass roof. I saw the garden blooming with thoughts I had never dared to say aloud. I saw the river, the names it carried, the ones I had let go. I saw the sky unraveling above the forest as I walked with no destination, only presence. And then I saw something else. The room faded away, and I stood in a space without form. Just starlight. Just breath. Just now. In front of me stood me. But not younger. Not older. Just still. We looked at one another without words. And in that gaze, I understood. I had never left. Not truly. All these places, the tree, the house, the river, the clocks, they weren't outside of me. They were me. Every path I had walked had been a return. Not to somewhere, but to someone. The figure nodded, and without movement, faded into the stars. I stood alone. And not alone. The chamber returned. The clock before me now pulsed faintly. And then, for the first time, it moved. Not with hands. Not with chimes. But with stillness. The kind of stillness that isn't silence, but the deepest sound. The kind of stillness that says, "You've arrived." I sat on the floor beside it and closed my eyes. And as I did, I felt the world shift. Not end. Not begin. Just shift. Like a breath drawn in. And gently released. I awoke with my hand still on the teacup dot. The room was unchanged. Outside, the light was the same. Only a minute had passed. But within me, a year had blossomed. A soft, full, gentle year. Not counted by days. But by stillness. By presence. By peace. I rose from my chair and opened the window. The wind carried a trace of jasmine and a hint of something I couldn't name. I smiled. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the layers of time and thought, I felt the echo of that final clock. Still. And eternal.